Hello and welcome to the Land and Climate Podcast. My name is Bertie Harrison-Braninsky, and today I'm talking to Sam Quashie-Idun about the international trade in used clothing and new research about the environmental and human impacts of textile waste in Ghana. Sam's day job is head of investigations at Greenpeace Africa. But in the spirit of transparency, I should also mention that he freelances with our own investigations team at Land and Climate Review. We're very lucky to have him, and we're excited to share the research we're working on at a later date. But today I want to discuss a new report he's authored for Greenpeace, titled Fast Fashion, Slow Poison. Focusing on Accra, the capital city of Ghana, the report documents a frightening surge in water, land, and air pollution, resulting from the huge volumes of discarded clothing shipped from rich nations to countries in the global south.
Picture walking on a beach and there not being any sand because it's just covered in textile waste. Piles of textile waste, piles of plastic, piles of shoes. It was very shocking.
I began by asking Sam how and why his team began looking into clothing waste in Ghana.
So first of all, this was a collaboration with Greenpeace Germany. So we had a couple calls around doing something around fast fashion. The team in Germany had already looked at Kenya and how fast fashion had impacted them. And so we thought it would be a great idea to look at Ghana. And me being from Ghana as well was good because I was very familiar with the ground and what was happening. So that prompted us to look into Ghana. And hopefully we'll continue looking into other African countries that are impacted by fast fashion.
So had you witnessed some of these issues in Accra before you started working on this?
A lot of people in Ghana don't even know about the impact fast fashion is having in the country. For me, I was aware of Kantamanto Market. I was aware of the fact that Ghana appears to be a dumping ground for so many things, especially for e-waste. So that was kind of an investigation I'd done a couple of years back when I was at university, looking at e-waste into the country. I don't think I was prepared for the mountains of clothes I would be seeing throughout this research. So I knew about e-waste, but the impact of fast fashion was not something I wasn't aware of the extent of the issue.
It can't be the same looking at a report than being there, but being shocked at what you see, like you just described, I think does still come across. The photos are quite shocking of mountains of waste and the coastline changing over the past 10 years. For people that haven't looked at those images yet, could you paint us a bit of a picture of the area around Kantamanto Market and Jamestown Beach and describe some of the things that we might see in the charts and graphics and photos that you've provided?
Great. Thanks for that question, Bertie. So I think I'm going to start with Kantamanto Market. So for Kantamanto Market, it is the largest secondhand clothes market in Africa. So it is massive. It's busy. It's hustle and bustle. It's from early morning to late evening. People are just hustling and selling clothes, so it's very tightly packed. The streets within the market are very narrow. A lot of wooden stalls. You have seamstresses, people making clothes, people selling them, people buying bales of clothes, people sorting clothes out. Like, it's chaos. So I think for Kantamanto Market, just picture a very busy, vibrant African market. And then when we move on to Old Fadama, which is one of our informal landfill sites, that's where you really see mountains of textile waste. My colleagues and I were climbing up these high mountains of just old, smelly clothes. You can picture cows as well roaming on top of those hills and eating what they can. You see birds, and you also see scrap collectors who rummage through the landfill sites and see what they can sell on. And then moving on to Jamestown Beach, which I think is one of the most heartbreaking things I've ever seen. I feel like I was on the beach, but picture walking on a beach and there not being any sand because it's just covered in textile waste. Piles of textile waste, piles of plastic, piles of shoes. It was very shocking. But at the same time, although this scene is so horrific, it's also juxtaposed with just scenes of fish sellers, market women, and fishermen just living life as normal, trying to not really be impacted by this.
You mentioned a lot of the different variations of job that people have in the area now around this industry. And you also use the word informal to describe the landfill sites. You also talk in the report about informal settlements that have become a thing pretty recently, right? Could you tell us a little bit more about that? Why do you use the word informal for those things? And to what extent is this really a microeconomy that really just totally revolves around this one product?
Yeah, I think it's informal because it's not an official location. I think that as a result of fast fashion and the import of electronic waste, for example, these dump sites have just been created. They're not official. No one is really monitoring them. They're kind of being controlled, I guess, by local community members. There's like a local hierarchical system taking place. So even when we were visiting those dump sites, we had to make sure we had a fixer to speak to, I guess, the local community leaders, kind of managing, getting permission to access the dump site and do our research there.
Because there are official landfill sites as well, right? And in theory, this trade should be all quite above board. The country is knowingly importing all of this waste. It is an international trade industry. Why have the official sites not worked out? And to what extent is some of this trade like illegal? Or you talk in the report at one point about the waste being classified as secondhand products rather than waste to skirt regulation. How kind of above board, below board is a lot of this?
Yeah, so I feel like, unfortunately, Ghana, and I'm from Ghana myself, is one of those countries where pretty much a lot of things just slide. Anything goes. With this particular issue, a lot of clothes are entering Ghana on a weekly basis. Actually, when looking at Kantamanto Market, for example, it receives 1,500 tons of clothes every week. And then from there, nearly 500,000 items of clothes leave Kantamanto Market and enter open spaces, whether it be our rivers, our lagoons, our beaches. So we're talking about massive numbers of clothes entering the country. We have an economy in Ghana that relies on this a lot. The market sellers on Kantamanto Market, this is their livelihoods, receiving these clothes, buying them, and then selling them on.
So we can't just ban it.
So that's the point. Yeah, we cannot just ban it. What we are calling for is a ban on dead waste. So we're saying, send us your clothes because we rely on those for our economies, but just make sure that you send us good quality clothes. From having done the research, we were present with the market women when they were buying these bales of clothes and kind of looking at them, doing like a triage of what can be used and what can't be used. And in the research that we found, speaking to market women, nearly 60% of the clothes that they bought are completely unsellable. And just to give you an idea of the types of clothes that we witnessed on the ground, we're talking about winter jackets, we're talking about beanie hats, we're talking about gloves, dirty clothes, old-fashioned clothes, clothes with holes in them. So these are completely unusable. And the fact that those are being shipped into Ghana in the first place is just so disrespectful.
And most of this is from China and Europe, right? And what does it look like at that end of the supply chain? Is this the clothes recycling bins that you see in the UK, or is it major suppliers getting rid of excess that they can't sell, or where's it coming from?
Yeah, that's a good question. And just to go back to the demographic and the countries in particular, so the UK is the top exporter. We also have Europe as a continent, but we're also dealing with South Korea and China as well. The clothes come in different ways. We did find some labels from charities as well. I think that was very interesting to see. There seems to be too many clothes entering the country in various forms. It's not the easiest way to track where all of this is coming, but we just know about the volumes in particular in which these are coming into the country.
I think we've given a sense of the visual picture of the pollution, but at a more scientific level, what are the issues in terms of water pollution, in terms of human impact for the people nearby? I know you did a few different types of testing on this kind of thing.
Yeah. So in terms of, I think it's great to start with the air pollution. So one thing that we were very focused on in this report is to kind of see the fate of clothes once they leave Kantamanto Market. So Old Fadama is the largest informal settlement in Accra. It has about 80,000 residents. And within Old Fadama, there are public wash houses. So these are public baths, essentially, where people come and shower and fulfill their hygienic needs. And we basically identified that to fuel hot water, a lot of these scraps of clothes are being burnt to boil the water in those wash houses. And so that was a shocking finding for us because we didn't really know that was a thing. And on top of that, that prompted us to do some air sampling just to kind of see, okay, what are the residents of these wash houses being exposed to? We found some really shocking statistics. The most important one was that benzene levels, we found benzene that was very present in the indoor air of these wash houses. And the benzene levels were about 200 times higher than European air guidelines. So this is like very bad. And benzene is a carcinogen as well, so it causes cancer in humans. We also identified substances like styrene, which is toxic to human reproduction. We're also talking about PAHs, so polyaromatic hydrocarbons, some of which are carcinogenic as well with chronic exposure. Phenol, which is mutagenic, so causes mutations. And we also identified VOC, so volatile organic compounds, at levels that also require immediate action. So these are pollutants that communities are breathing, adults, children, sometimes babies, so it's very serious and really concerning. Also at the landfill sites, got this machine to do some infrared testing, which was, I'd never seen a machine like that before. So my colleagues from Greenpeace Germany organized for that to happen. And basically what this machine did was we basically collected 164 garments from landfill sites. And we were just very much curious to know what exactly these clothes were made of. And so according to our testing, 89% of the clothes were made of fossil fuel-based synthetic fibers, so plastic, essentially. Polyester, acrylic, nylon. And obviously, these don't break down. Microplastics will be there for a long time. And obviously, this kind of runs off into our water, runs off into our soil. So it's a huge concern. And actually, I mentioned the cows on the landfill sites. I've just feared to even imagine what they've been eating. And also, when looking at Jamestown Beach, the fish, the ecosystem, this is a community of fishermen and fish sellers. And especially seeing how this is really a social justice issue because it's impacting our communities.
You have some good descriptive writing in the report where you talk about how the clothes get tangled on the beach until they're like giant tentacles making their way further and further out to sea, right?
Correct. And, what we could see was only above sea level. There's even more below sea level. And we even went on a boat with fishermen just to go with them while they're trying to catch fish. And Bertie, like the nets were just full of textile waste. There was barely any fish, And so speaking to fishermen on the ground, they were telling us that this is an issue. It's almost like there's so much that they're already being plagued with. We have the foreign vessels that are already overfishing in our coastal area. So they're dealing with that. They're dealing with the textile waste. And because fish is so hard to find, they're having to use their canoes and go further deep into the ocean. We need to know that our waters in Ghana are very rough. It's not as smooth, so a lot of horror stories have happened over time, unfortunately. And another thing that was quite alarming, one of the fishermen I spoke to said that metals and sharp objects can get tangled in these clothes, and a lot of his colleagues ended up getting scratched by foreign metal objects and catching tetanus and needing tetanus jabs. So this is really a big issue. And so once the fish is caught and brought back to the shore, we have fish sellers who collect the fish, and what they're having to do with the fish and the prawns that they collect is actually remove the plastic from around the fish, sometimes inside the fish. The issue of microplastics arises again, and what are we consuming as Ghanaians? The quality of fish that we are eating is also a big concern.
You discussed a little bit about looking at the sources of where things have come from, which countries. I know in the report, or at least the annex of the report, you also look into some of the specific clothing brands. Could you talk us through your policy recommendations or demands that you have? A lot of that is kind of about the responsibility of the companies at the beginning, right?
So I think in terms of our demands as Greenpeace Africa, so the first one falls into the hands of the Ghanaian government. It's vital that we ban the export of dead waste. But as I have said to you before, we're not calling for a complete ban because our communities rely on these imports.
So secondhand clothes, but not just waste.
Correct. I think people should ask themselves, if you wouldn't wear this, why do you think someone else would? Unless you've kind of fallen out of love with the item. But if it's actually of poor quality and unwearable and unsuitable for the climate that you are sending these clothes to, you need to be disposing of your own waste yourself and not seeing Ghana as this dumping ground. Another demand that we are discussing in the report is to implement the polluter pays principle for all past and future environmental and health damage globally, and also adopting EPR schemes, so extended producer responsibility schemes in the global north is also a vital part. And also kind of looking at supporting local fashion, local sustainable fashion. There's so many options in Ghana. We spoke to such incredible organizations that are really trying to do something and bring life to this dead waste and this fashion clothes that are entering the country.
Like restoration.
Exactly, yeah. Restoration, rejigging, revamping, breathing new life into products. And an organization we spoke to was The Revival, who are doing such phenomenal local work on the ground and have really creative and beautiful pieces on the ground.
Something that does really come through in your report is that it's not a static issue, really, any of the things that you talk about. Like I said, the photos of the coastline, you can see the waste growing, and the interviews with market sellers where they discuss how the products and the imports are changing all of the time, but it's not really trending in a good direction for them with business. Where do you see things headed as they are at the moment? And maybe how could some of these changes create a different future in, say, 10 years for Accra?
That is a good question. I'm a very optimistic person, but sometimes you just see a situation and you're like, okay, first of all, how did we get to this point? How is this still happening? And, is there a light at the end of the tunnel? Fast fashion is the biggest it's ever been, with brands like Shein and Temu and all these massive fast fashion brands. There's no sign of them slowing down. There's no sign of them upping the quality of their products, which means that the life cycle of their garments are just shortened until the government decides to have a hard ban on these exports. I don't see how things can change at the fast speed. Another issue that we're seeing is also around education. Not many people are aware of what is happening in Ghana. I know about Jamestown Beach because my grandfather built our family home there. So it's a very personal place to me. We did actually a vox pop exercise in the streets of Accra, showing people an image of Jamestown Beach in the state that you're seeing it in the report and asking them whether they know where this beach is. And people were shocked that this was in Ghana, So I think we need a lot of education around what is happening, more advocacy locally. We need the media to cover this intensively. Fast fashion companies taking accountability for the whole life cycle of their products is so important because it's burden to us, And I think that as consumers as well, we need to really evaluate our thinking around overconsumption as well, because this overconsumption is constantly fed to us, whether it's Black Friday sales or whether it's all these enticing deals that you're seeing online and in shops. So I think there needs to just be a whole reshuffle of the system and the mindsets of all of us.
How unique is the situation in Ghana? I know that your field research was in Accra, but would you expect to see pretty much the same situations in other importing countries? And what are the other major importing countries?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think looking at our charts, and actually also looking at previous work. So I know that our colleagues at Greenpeace Germany did a report on Kenya. After the launch of our report in Ghana, people in Kenya were sending me videos of the landfill sites there too. And it's crazy to see how similar the situation is. We're also talking about mountains of textile waste in Kenya. Another country that surprised us in the research was also Tunisia, which I don't think has been covered. So I think there's room to kind of explore Tunisia as a country that's also kind of increasing imports of these secondhand clothes. Other African countries, we're looking at Angola, we're looking at Congo, the DRC, we're looking at Benin. And I think the top one, though, altogether is Pakistan. So yes, I think that there's so much more to dig into when it comes to this. I think Ghana is just one of many countries that is being choked with textile waste. So hopefully more journalists will look into those countries and be open to collaborating and seeing what we can find and hold the right people to account.
My thanks to Sam Quashie-Idun for coming on the show. The Fast Fashion Slow Poison report, along with other further reading, is linked in the blurb for this episode. And you can find more podcasts and articles on our website, at landclimate.org. Please do follow us or leave a review on your preferred podcast platform, and we'll be back again in 2 weeks' time. Until then, goodbye, and thanks for listening.